to kick things off, Gilad, if you could start off by recounting the recent events in the Jazz Festival in Vienna.
Yeah, I was scheduled to play in Jazz Festival Vienna a few days ago with the World Peace Trio, a band made of Kamal Musalem, a Jordanian Palestinian oud player, Dwiki Darmawan, the Indonesian music ambassador, a pianist, great pianist, and myself. A few days before the scheduled date, we learned from our booking agent that Fritz Storm, the head of the festival, was under pressure from the city mayor office, and we had two options: either removing me from the program or canceling the gig. This is what Fritz Tom offered us to start with. We thought that removing me from the program was a slightly hilarious option because I'm the leading musician there. I'm kind of playing the melodies, and the festival didn't have a problem with it. That to let their audience just sit in a concert with no melodies. However, we agreed to remove my name, but I approached the festival through a lawyer and made it very clear to them that they will have to explain in court what is it that I've said that is not legal or breach their regulations or whatever, because I'm working in Austria, in Germany, quite a lot. I'm teaching in Germany. I'm playing in Germany quite a lot. I just 2 weeks ago had a week in Berlin that included also a book launch, a lecture. I had parliament members in my talk. By the way, I got also support from the Bundestag, I should mention, when this happened in Austria. Members of the Bundestag, and obviously this Fritz Storm, this head of the festival, didn't have an argument. He didn't know what it was that I was saying that was illegal or I wasn't allowed to say. And then he changed his narrative. He said that they have to remove us from the festival because we didn't sell enough tickets. I checked with the venue. This wasn't the case. We would sell out the gig. It would be very full. And
So this
the story.
this brings us to the first thing that was really troubling me about this, which is what exactly is being silenced here. I've followed your work for some time. Your previous book, The Wandering Who, very controversial, but you weren't seeing this degree of targeting of your career in response to that. You've written your new book, Being in Time. Now, it goes into much broader aspects, not to do with Jewishness necessarily, but to do with the whole political scene, post-political scene, to do with to do with postmodernism, to do with the things that are driving forward the West as a whole. And you're critical of these things, and now you're persona non grata. So my next question is: do you have any real feel for what exactly you're saying or doing that they find so impossible to allow into the public realm?
I guess that this is the book that you're talking about, Being in Time.
Yes.
And what I do in Being in Time, which is a very short book, it's even shorter than The Wandering Who, I actually extended my research from Jewish identity politics into identity politics in general. And I came to a conclusion that the biggest problem that we have in our society has something to do with the hegemony of Jerusalemite ideology, the domination of Jerusalem in our society. Now, what is Jerusalem? Jerusalem is the idea that we follow strict orders, mitzvot, commandments, or if to talk, to fall into your domain of research, regulations. Athens, as opposed to Jerusalem, is the place where we think Athens is the birthplace of philosophy, of science, of beauty. We have been living in a total tyranny of correctness. And what I do in being time, I manage to identify who is it and who are the leading ideologies that manage to impose this tyranny of correctness on us, and basically to turn us into intellectual zombies.
And
Now,
the idea that part of what's going on here is an attack on beauty, I think, is quite an interesting one. We're seeing relationships, families, are becoming ever more coarsened. We're seeing anything that's beautiful is being despised. It's being destroyed. There seems to be a hatred towards beauty, towards anything positive.
by the way, they those who don't appreciate the church or family values would actually regard it as the complete opposite of beauty. They will regard it as reactionary values and so on and so on. What is interesting for me is that the book is now out for a month or maybe 5 weeks. There was not I didn't see a single attempt to deconstruct the book, to criticize it, to say that something there is problematic. What I see now is a desperate attempt to destroy my musical career. Now, this is quite strange because I'm really playing every night. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So they try to stop me in Vienna. They try to stop me to play music in Vienna, and within 2 hours, I was invited to give a lecture in Vienna. So it actually backfired. Um, Now, I you spoke about beauty, and I believe I believe that we can just talk about beauty and move beyond the intellectual superlatives. You can see what happened to our art. What happened,
This is
you know?
exactly one of the things. I mean, we're seeing this grotesque art. We're seeing,
Exactly.
particularly in public
If you look
spaces.
at the decadence art that was imposed on us by the same people who imposed on us the tyranny of correctness, it is very troubling. And when you see who was playing in this jazz festival in Vienna, you understand that rather than having jazz that was music of resistance, jazz was born as the music of the oppressed.
Yes.
And I, by the way, one of the very few jazz musicians who still regard jazz as a form of resistance. And I think that people who like me appreciate it. The Vienna Jazz Festival, this Fritz Tom, is the ultimate form of compliance. The Jewish lobby pressured the mayor. The mayor comes to Fritz Tom's and immediately he complies with those ridiculous demands, and it obviously backfires. Uh, um, beauty, beauty, like everything else in our society, has been reduced into a commodity, something that we consume rather than enjoy. And this is quite frustrating But on the other hand, it creates a lot of room for people like me who are actually committed to beauty. I prefer to play in clubs rather than being funded by bankers or major Mammonites corporations.
Well, this is where the freedom, where the resistance is happening. It can't happen in the well-funded spaces. It can't happen in the government-funded spaces because these are all controlled, and there's only one voice allowed. And this takes away the whole pluralism of a debate, of an exchange, be it musical or be it philosophical. So we end up having to find other spaces. So that's where we've got the internet now, and the internet is something that they've not been able to regulate thus far, and out of it is being generated a whole series of ideas, and it's extremely pluralistic. There's all sorts of ideas and there's all sorts of spaces, and it's being created by the people who are occupying the virtual world that they've created. So, and we're seeing clubs, and we're seeing ventures like the UK Column providing some sort of venue for people to share ideas, but it's all alternative. The word alternative has come out of the woodwork because anything that's not alternative is controlled.
But this is the issue. The issue is exactly that. The idea of control is the essence of Jerusalem. So we have to move. We have to move away, to drift away as fast as we can from this realm of mitzvot, of commandments, of correctness, and to search for what we are and who we are. Now, we can already see, and this is really your domain as an engineer, we can see how dangerous is the realm of commandment, of mitzvot, of regulation. I know that in the UK column you're looking a lot into the Grenfell Tower. And this is exactly what happened there. I'm accused of blaming Grenfell Tower on the Jews, something that obviously I've never done. But what I would argue, that Grenfell Tower, the idea, we heard this Andrew Goldman, on the morning of the 14th, talking about the fact that the cladding were all regulated. Whether it is true or not, I don't know. They're looking into it. And once you fit within regulations, you don't have to think. This is exactly the Judaic trick of Jerusalem. Once you follow the regulations, you put that tefillin in the morning, you say one prayer 2 minutes later, you eat kosher, you follow commandments, you don't sleep with your neighbor's wife or whatever. Once you follow all these regulations, you don't have to think. You have kind of an agreement with God. This is very different from this concept of attempting to understand the notion of God loving, looking for ethics inside yourself.
The key, understanding versus learning by rote, understanding versus following.
Understanding versus following rules.
Yes.
Following rules. Now, there is something in Judaism that is called Naseh Venishma. We do, then we listen. First we obey, then we contemplate.
Yes.
Now, this is the complete opposite of Athens, because in Athens you contemplate and then you do. And this is really the issue. And I, to a certain extent, in Being and Time, identify every problem that we have in our society with this domination of Jerusalem. Now, domination of Jerusalem doesn't necessarily mean the domination of the Jews. Tony Blair is a Jerusalemite. He took us into a war in the name of nonsense, immoral interventionist agenda, kind of rules that he himself basically invented. Theresa May is a Jerusalemite. I would surprise you and argue that the biggest problem with Hitler was that he ended up a Jerusalemite. And I think that
If I can come
if we do
briefly
believe,
back, if I can come briefly back to Grenfell, I was amazed to find we put out a view that the problem was the Grenfell cladding complied with the regulations. The problem was that the mere fact of it complying with the regulations turned off everyone's critical thinking faculties, that it stopped questioning and it stopped thinking and it stopped people actually
exactly,
worrying about the real threat that fire posed, and that the cladding did comply with the regulations, and not just that, but with the letter of the regulations, and the mere fact of the presence of regulations generates a view that you comply with the letter, because it's written as law. It's written in a legalistic way. So you comply with the letter. You don't worry about anything else because you comply with the letter. It doesn't say
now
understand the general framework and then work from there. And here are some rules to guide you. But you're working from first principles, and that's not how it works. You comply with the letter. You don't comply, you don't get a ticket. You do comply, you do get a ticket. So I was putting this out, and I was amazed that a jazz musician was the only other person putting this information forward, because there was nobody, there's a wee bit now, but there was nobody from the press, no one from the construction industry actually putting this idea forward that the regulations had in fact blinded us to the real risk.
This is exactly the issue. The question that I was asked quite often in America, funny enough, not that much here, because in Britain people are not used to think. We don't have a First Amendment, so we don't contemplate issues unless we are kind of part of the radical dissidents. The question that we have to ask ourselves here is why Jerusalem is so much powerful than Athens. On the one hand, every good thing that we have in this society, in our society, in the West, comes from Athens. Science, beauty, tolerance, exchange, philosophy, symphonies, all come from Athens. And yet we tend to give up on Athens so easily and follow Jerusalem. Why? The reason is that Jerusalem makes things very easy. It's much easier when an engineer doesn't have to think. When a construction engineer, he has kind of a basket and he put things that fit with regulations, and he doesn't even have to think about the possible consequences of making a combination, putting together a combination of panels and so on and so on.
So if we're in a world where postmodernism is the driving force, the driving idea, and postmodernism's basic tenet is that you can know nothing, there's nothing that you can have faith in anymore, that you will never know what the truth is. There is no such thing as truth. That's the basic line of postmodernism. And because that doesn't give you any basis of action, we'll have Marxism as well, because we don't know what else to have. So it's a strange mix, but that's what we've got. It seems odd, at least in the surface of it, that a philosophy that holds that that there is no right or wrong, there is no truth, there is nothing that you can know, you can never know anything, married with a philosophy that says we're going to see all the power of the state melt away, and we're going to achieve this by first giving all power to the state. That you bring those two together and you get something that wants regulation, power to control thought. It's not what I would have expected, but it's very much what's coming forward. So it is your attack. My question initially was what exactly is being silenced? Is your attack on the thought control aspects of this? Is that why they're determined to get Atzmon?
I think that what I did in my new book, I first identified the problem, and the problem is the domination of Jerusalem, tyranny of correctness. And the next thing that I did, I tried to point at those who brought us there. And first comes the new left. And to be very short, I identified, and I'm not the first one to do it. Actually, quite a few leftists did it before me. Identify a conflict between left and working people. Just to be brief, the left is very upset by the idea that working people never vote for left or hardly vote for the left. They prefer to vote for Theresa May, for Adolf Hitler, for Donald Trump, and so on and so on. And the left see a point in dividing the working people into new sectarian groups. So they teach them to speak as a woman, as a gay, as a Jew, as a lesbian, as a black, and so on and so on and so on. This is why we see also a lot of immigration, because it's there to debase to subside the power of the working people. And the Jewish intelligentsia is engaged in a very similar project, because Jews also suffered in their history from working people being united. And this may explain now their fear, which is delusional, of Corbyn, for instance. They seem as a unifying factor, and they are horrified by it. Now, the thing is that it's quite simple. The model that I present in Being in Time is simple, but I'm definitely standing up against quite dangerous, domineering forces within society. And I guess that those whom I criticize are really upset by it, but they don't have the guts to look into it, and they prefer to try to silence me, to destroy my music career. And I tell you something: if I would play in Vienna Festival, I would play in Porgy and Bess, great jazz club. I played them many times. It won't be a story. Once
Yeah,
they ban me, it becomes a
it
story.
becomes a story. It's everything they do these days, right? From CNN lying about Donald Trump and then going after someone who put a joke on the internet, and only to become the joke of the internet. Everything that sort of hostile, regressive left is doing tends to be backfiring.
Yeah, I agree, and it is shocking, a very clumsy of them, and to a certain extent, I kind of welcome it.
Yeah.
This is how I promote my work, apparently.
Well, it's certainly there's this element of backfiring, but that brings us to maybe a larger question, which is how is it done? Because how do you go about sabotaging someone's career when someone's going to play a jazz club? How is this phone call made, or what's the mechanism that's employed to get people to respond in this way, which is it's very cowed, isn't it? It's the people who are organizing these events. They often respond in a way that suggests they're whipped. They don't have any questioning of what they're being told. All of a sudden, they're folding. How does this actually work? How is it done?
Obviously, I'm not the right person to ask, because I've never tried to jeopardize anyone's career, and quite the opposite. I see duty to help people if I find them talented, regardless of who they are and what they are. It can be Jews, Palestinians, people of, my band was always kind of a melting pot for a lot of people from a lot of places. It still is.
In
But
in
I
one
tell you
regard,
something.
one aspect of this is it seems to be the credence that's given to the word complaint. I saw this in my hometown. There was a local pastor from a tiny little church, and he was visiting. He was an Australian chap, big man, big booming voice. He went down to do some street preaching in Perth, right, which is a
Yeah.
long history of street preaching. And he was arrested for breach of the peace by Police Scotland because there'd been a complaint, right? And they said, you have to stop this. He said, I'm preaching. I don't need to stop anything. I've not broken any law. You have to stop. What law have I broken? Don't get smart with me,
Yeah.
sunshine. You have to stop. There's been a complaint. He said, well, so what? There's been a complaint. It doesn't mean anything. But all of a sudden, complaints seem to be what conviction. Complaints seem to be everything. This unwillingness to offend, is that one of the driving forces?
I think that this is exactly what happened in Austria. They were attacked. The Jewish lobby obviously operate as a tribal setting. So as soon as they decide to target someone, they will make sure that the right office is getting something like 150 telephone calls within an hour, and this has done. They've been doing it with me for quite a while. There is something slightly deeper here, and I think that we should really look into it. 2 days ago, 3 days ago, there was a Sky interview with this guy, Gideon Falter, from the campaign against anti Semitism. It was an interview on Sky. And he was complaining about the rise of anti Semitism. At the same time, the police and the Crown Prosecution Services say, no, there is no rise of anti Semitism. We don't have, maybe there was a rise of 12%. It's insignificant. Now, what is amazing for me is that those people who are actually engaged, and this is what the CAA are doing, the campaign against anti-Semitism, they are engaged, they are actively engaged in destroying other people's career, musicians, artists, political activists. They smear them and so on and so on. And they are themselves tormented by the viciousness of themselves. It's a reflexive issue. Let me try to explain it. This is very crucial to my work. When you are obnoxious or aggressive or brutal with someone else, you tend to believe that the other can be as obnoxious or brutal as you happen to be. Those Jewish organizations and Jewish activists that are playing these dirty games, they come with fictitious stories about myself. They call the mayor of Vienna, or they call the Church of England, because tonight I'm playing in a church and they try to stop it as well. They must believe that I, for instance, could be as bad as they happen to be. Now, when you push yourself into these mental circumstances, you end up in a vicious circle. The more brutal you are, the more you are tormented by your surrounding environment. This is why the Israelis, for instance, are so devastated by the possibility that the Palestinians would be as murderous as they happen to be. Because the Israelis say, if we can drop all those bombs on civilian population, Surely they could one day do the same to us. And it is very hard to find a way out of this vicious circle. And this is why Jews bring disasters on themselves time after time. This is not Gilad Atzmon. This is when you look at Jews, they all admit to have a past suffocated with holocausts. And funny enough, the most interesting solution, the most interesting solution to this issue was offered by Jesus Christ. Turn your other cheek.
Yes, indeed.
This is the only way. This is the only way. Now, this is something I could see, for instance, today that they're lying about me, and I can go and be, trying to jeopardize my talk in the church, and I could go and be vicious with them, and I try not to play the same game. I try to remove myself from it and to be the nice guy. Now, it's very much against my nature because I was brought up as an Israeli. I was trained to be assertive, to react. And, for 20 years, I tried to take something from Christ, with, I think, the ultimate remedy to the Jewish condition. And by the way, this is why Jews, and especially Orthodox Jews, see Christ as the ultimate evil, which is beyond absurd, because we are talking about the nicest, the most beautiful human being ever.
Moving on from how it's done, right, which we know a little bit about, who does it is the next question that occurred to me. And one of the really fascinating bits that came out of this discussion was the fact that you kept mentioning mayors. That's strange.
Yeah.
Why would city mayors suddenly be the conduit for silencing opinion? Well, if you're talking about Athens, if you're talking about the very idea of the Western city-state, you're talking about something that's inherently plural, that's inherently civilized, that's inherently free, places where people can meet, places where people can exchange ideas, homes of universities, and all of these sorts of ideas. And yet, in the 21st century version of this, we've got city mayors who get a phone call and shut down a jazz musician because someone says, that person over there, he thinks in ways that we don't approve of.
For sure.
And yet, the mayors are the conduit of the power, but are not the source of the idea. That's a very dangerous combination.
It was amazing that within the same week we saw two mayors acting against artists. One, it was my case in Vienna, and then in Miami. I think that I spoke about it. Roger Waters at a concert. He had a choir of kids that were trained to play some segments from the wall, if I get it right. And then the mayor of Miami banned them from doing so, which is quite tragic for these kids. I'm sure that Roger Waters survived it quite easily. Now, to start with, the connection between the Jewish lobby and the political. This is something that we have to explain, and it's very easy to explain. In the old days, the Israelis used to buy tanks, airplanes, missiles. Then they understood that it's much cheaper to buy a politician. When you buy a politician, they come with tanks, with missiles. They send the kids, the Americans, to fight in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya. All right? So it's much cheaper to corrupt the Western political system rather than buying tanks, because in a tank, if you buy a tank, you will have to put inside it, you will have to put 4 Jewish soldiers. The same applies to F-16. You'll have to train a Jewish Israeli pilot to fly it and to drop bombs on Gaza. So we are seeing AIPAC operating in America for more than a while. We have here in Britain, we have LFI. The LFI, Labor Friends of Israel, was chief fundraiser for Tony Blair at the time we were taken to a war in Iraq, criminal war. Now we have the CFI that is pushing us to many more conflicts like Libya, Iran, Syria, and so on and so on. We have the CRIF in France, and these lobbies are operating in many, many levels. If you want to spend some time looking into AIPAC, when you join AIPAC, you can join different clubs. It depends how much money you put in. If you put, let's say, I don't have the figures in front of me, but I saw it once. If you spend $5,000, you are on a state level. If you spend $20,000, you move on to the Senate, Congress, and if you put $150,000, they will promise you to have a dinner with Trump. Now it depends what are your interests. If you just want to have a falafel chain in Philadelphia, you don't have to spend $150,000. $5,000 is enough because you want to meet your local government. In order to stop Gilad Atzmon from playing in Vienna, we need people who are involved in local governments rather than EU or Austrian government. It's enough to deal with people who can mount pressure on Vienna, on the mayor office. By the way, I don't even know if it was the mayor. Maybe the mayor didn't even know about it, but I know that it was the mayor's office. Another very interesting thing that we also know that members of the Green Party were operating against me in Vienna. I have the name of one of the MPs. She is not a senior MP. She's kind of a new MP.
That again is very interesting, right? Because the Green Party, traditionally, you would say would be pro-Palestinian. You would generally expect them to be quite hostile towards Israel. But what they are is followers of postmodernism, neo-Marxism, and the whole agenda that's generating from it. So when you start criticizing guys like the Frankfurt School, like Reich, that organizations like the Green Party have based their agenda on, based their means of changing society on
the Green Party.
You're starting to reveal some truths here that may be very uncomfortable for them. So I'm wondering whether the who of this persecution maybe started with the Jewish lobby, but is perhaps now much wider.
I think that it's, as I mentioned before, there is a clear bond between Jewish intelligentsia and the new left. Both Jewish intelligentsia and new left want to see a society divided into sectarian groups. So it's hardly a surprise that they operate together on different goals and funded by the same people. And I saw it somewhere, I think, in an Israeli paper today. But the message is very clear. People who operate Jewishly, politically as Jews, are always committed primarily for what is good for the Jews. Clearly, quite often they don't agree amongst themselves what is good for the Jews. But when it comes to the battle against what they define as antisemitism, they would often agree. Because, for instance, Gilad Atzmon, myself, I'm very critical of all forms of Jewish identity politics. I'm not just critical of Zionism. I actually believe that the Jewish anti-Zionists are way more racists than the Zionists. And it's very easy to prove. I show that in Israel, the third biggest party is an Arab party in the parliament. While when you look at the situation in JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, and all those kind of so-called anti-Zionist Jewish organizations, you won't find a single goy, a single Gentile, let alone Arab, in any of their leadership. So it is quite easy to understand that my criticism of Jewish identity politics in general draws a lot of resistance from all spectrum of Jewish identity politics.
Looking at the Jewish and Israeli aspects, there's a couple of things I've spotted in the news just in the last few weeks that I'd just like you to comment on that touch on these matters. Firstly, one from, I think it was Chicago, there was a lesbian, gay, bisexual march called the Dyke March. And Jewish lesbians who turned up with the rainbow flag with the Star of David superimposed in white were told to leave or remove the flags because the flags were triggering to the pro-Palestinians. So what you're seeing here is a weapon that's been used, this identity politics weapon that's been used, weaponized identity, is a weapon that people in the Jewish lobby are perhaps losing control of, and it's potentially very dangerous because if it spins round and starts to target the Jews, that can have depressingly familiar consequences. And
you're absolutely right, and this is something that we saw in all the revolutionary Jewish movements. We look at the Bolshevik revolution, and it's a total Jewish control that serves Jewish interest in Russia, and sooner or later, Stalin turns against them. And it's not. It doesn't happen just to Jews. Let's look at the grassroots Islamic organizations. So if it's true that it was Israel that supported Hamas initially, it didn't take too long before Hamas started to evolve and developed its own interest and became the number one fierce enemy of Israel. The same happened to the Americans and the Taliban. Mm-hmm. The same happened with ISIS. If it's true that ISIS is a creation of Israel, America, Britain, and so on and so on, it's definitely not controlled by any of those anymore.
One other thing I'd like you to comment on.
But it's a natural development for identity groups to understand at a certain stage that their interests do not necessarily fit with those who are dictated by the Jewish organization, especially by George Soros.
Yes, who is now not only persona non grata in Hungary, but also it would appear in Netanyahu's Israel.
No, he never been too welcome in Israel, but I don't even take that very seriously, because when we learned that George Soros was invested in BDS, in boycott and divestment and sanction, we also learned that he himself was also invested in Israeli factories. I think SodaStream was the factory in the West Bank. So I don't take I don't believe Soros to be a genuine ideologically motivated character. He
Well,
is basically funding the control opposition. That's what this is what he's doing. It's very clever on his part.
well, that brings us back to Israel, and there's one aspect of that I've noticed that comes from there that seems to be unique as far as I can tell. In the West as a whole, the principle of silencing opposition, of no platforming people, of closing them down, of having no debate because debating with the other side would simply give them credibility. Their ideas are so toxic that they must be silenced. There is no discussion. It must be silenced, and if it has to be violent, it has to be violent. That's the left's view. The right, in such as it exists in Western society, has been coming at this from a very alternative viewpoint. They've been coming at it with memes and jokes and talks, and they've been the very reverse of these tactics, because the left hold all the power, all the establishment power, the university chairs, the control of the legislatures, the way that the law is being developed to, for example, silence free speech. All of this is coming from the left. I would include the Conservative Party in that. The right is a counterculture and is small and is disparate and is a network of people with ideas, and they seem to be making some headway. But it's a very different beast. Now, when you go to Israel, I was very surprised to find a campaign ongoing by the right in Israel to silence, to no platform, to remove jobs and tenure from anyone in the university who supports BDS. So we're seeing in Israel, and as far as I can tell, uniquely in Israel, the same tactics exactly that the left is using, of silencing, of no platforming, of targeting people's livelihoods, is actually being used by the right in Israel to target the left. It's a strange turnaround.
There are two ways to look at it. If you look at it from a Jerusalemite perspective, and you understand that the no platform is primarily a Jewish tactics, and in Jewish there is a word for it within the Jewish culture, what we call cherem or excommunication, something that happened to Spinoza, Uriel de Costa, and so on and so on, and to many contemporary. If you understand that this is primarily a Jewish tactics, you understand that if the Jews dominate the left, they would use this tactic in Europe, in the West, against the right. And since the Israel is the Jewish state, they would use this, whoever has the hegemony would use it. So there is no anomaly. It's just a Jewish symptom. So in Israel, the right are strong and they explore these Jewish tactics. In Europe, in the West, the left is strong, and very Jewish, dominated by Jewish culture. So we see these tactics. The other way to look at it is from more kind of a universal and philosophical perspectives. In the left, there is no dichotomy between activism and scholarship. There is no such a thing. So when you see academic, left academic, in most cases, the kind of people like Chomsky, they are also activists, and they would use any method to promote their views. And if this includes silencing other people, this is how it would work. And you can look at Freud and Marxists and so on and so on. In the right, there is a clear dichotomy between scholarship and activism. These things don't mix together. The notion of aletheia, of truth, is very, very crucial within right circles and intellectual circles. And this is, again, something that I explore in Being and Time, because while the left presents a dream what the world ought to be, the right is committed to what the world is. So there is a crucial, there is a significance, attention to truthfulness. Since the left doesn't differentiate between scholarship and activism, it is totally legitimate to use any means, any method to silence you or anyone else that interferes with the vision of the future.
Well,
And
that brings us to, I think, a point to close. I'd like to explore lastly, which is how to resist this. How do we fight back? If, as we do, we value truth, we believe there is such a thing, and we believe that it's debate and discussion that will reveal and refine the questions that will get us closer towards that goal. And we're being closed down. You're being closed down. Many people are being closed down. What is the way that we fight back against that silencing?
okay, if Athens and Jerusalem are fundamental features that are in dialectic struggle, we don't have to be worried. Look what happened in America in the last election, and I'm definitely not a Trump supporter, but despite years of tyranny of correctness and sex revolution and clear attempt to destroy the church and the patriarchal nature of the American family, completely out of the blue, this Donald Trump comes, and he's definitely not the most intelligent person on this planet, and he managed to prove that at least half of the Americans or the voters don't buy into it. And the same happened in France. So one of the most interesting things that I can say about it, and this is a theme that I explore in the Being and Time, is that for most people, utopia, the dream, is nostalgia. And this is why Trump won, because he said, I'm going to make America great again. This is why so many people voted for Corbyn, because he is a nostalgic 70s lefty character. People seem to comply with this tyranny, but they aren't happy. And as soon as we point it out, there is firework. So I believe that society, our society in Britain, in France, as we saw in the last election, in Israel as well, in America, people are happy to fight back. They are tired of this nuevo lefty tyranny. They want to be in time. They want to seek the truth, not necessarily to know what is the truth. And they are very excited when they believe that they find it.
Well, Gilad Atzmon, thank you very much. That's been fascinating. I, as always, finish with more questions than I start.
It's always great to talk to you, man. Yeah.
But that's been super. And until next time, thank you very much.